Let's pass now to part 3, which are the unaddressed 20th century inconsistency, as we will see, of geometric character. This is, I published a number of papers in that subject. The one which I will review is a paper also published in a referee journal and not in a journal in which I am an editor, by Galileo and Electrodynamics. Now look at the title, 9 Theorems of Inconsistency of General Theory of Relativity and Their Possible Resolution. Now just the title alone is extremely disturbing to physicists in the field, politicians I should say, in gravitation. And this additional article has been completely ignored by all so-called orthodox experts in the field, despite we're talking about theorems. Theorems can be easily disproved in refereed journal. This has not happened. Okay, let's see out of 9 theorems I have reviewed only 3. The first theorem is that Einstein gravitation is incompatible with the Freud identity of the Riemannian geometry. Here a little bit of history. If you look at the best books in gravitation, you will see that the Riemannian geometry only has 4 identities. Well, this is a 5th identity by Freud. This identity was systematically ignored since its formulation in the early part of the past century. Why so? Because it's incompatible with Einstein. That is the reason why. I'm sure that if the identity had been compatible with Einstein gravitation, it would have been quoted. Now, what is the Freud identity? The Freud identity essentially established that the need in the right-hand side of the equation of 2 tensors, that which is, however, careful, of first order in magnitude, So essentially, the Freud identity provides a magnificent geometrical confirmation of the the paper at MIT Annals of Physics regarding the need of 2 tensors on the right-hand side as a source tensor, one of the electromagnetic and the other of short-term interaction. As a matter of fact, the 2 tensors in the Freud identity can be rearranged in any way you want. One of them, this is all allowed, no manipulation in this case, but because you move elements from one to the other, you don't do approximation, no. But one of the tensors can be traceless and the other can have trace. This is precisely, then you get one tensor characterizing the electromagnetic origin of the mass, long range, exterior gravitational mass, and the other, the inertial mass, the interior, and so on. Careful about the number of papers that claims that Einstein gravitation is fully compatible with the Freud identity, because Einstein has source term on the right-hand side. Those papers have been commissioned by the organized interest on Einstein doctrine by Einstein followers. And they will not state the key point of the Freud identity, that the source term have to be first order. Namely, of the value of the T00 has to be of the same order of magnitude of the mass or of the rest energy of the object you are considering. No, they only claim that Einstein considered also source term for the charge. But again, those source terms for the charge have a contribution of 10 to the minus 40, 10 to the minus 45 to the gravitational field. So just the idea that such irrelevant source verify Freud identity is manipulation of knowledge, sometimes intentional, commissioned, believe it or not. But this is a beautiful confirmation on the studies that they also ignore, not on the description of the gravitational field, on the much more important problem of the origin of the gravitational field, which was solved completely in the 1974 paper at the MIT Annals of Physics. The second theorem essentially states that the Riemannian description of gravitation does not preserve or does not leave invariant the basic unit of measurements, and does not predict invariant numerical value. Namely, numerical value does not predict numerical values that are invariant with respect to time. This can be proved in many different ways. The way in which you can see it intuitively to prove is that the map from Minkowski to Riemann is non-canonical. So this means that the Riemannian geometry as an intrinsic non-canonical structure. As such, by very definition, a non-canonical structure does not preserve the basic unit, the number 1. So if you have, for instance, a set of units, and you subject it to any action that you want admitted under the Riemannian geometry, you will change the numerical value of the unit, because of only canonical transformation will preserve the basic unit. When you go at the operator level, you have even much more catastrophic inability. The third theorem essentially states that Einstein general relativity is incompatible with claimed experimental verifications because of lack of uniqueness in the linearization process, as well as lack of invariance. The so-called experimental verification of Einstein general relativity crucially depend on the so-called linearization, for instance, the PPN approximation and so on. Now, because the original equations are nonlinear, so they have to be linearized in one way or another. What's the point here? The point, what is a linearization? Linearization is an expansion. And so, first you have a large variety of expansions that you can select, number 1. Number 2, once you have selected one expansion, you have to identify with respect to what. So you have a large number of entities that you can use for the expansion. And after this second large degree of freedom, you still have an additional large degree of freedom where you want to truncate the expansion. So, ladies and gentlemen, sure, assuming that, yes, there are out of this large variety of possibilities, sure, you select one that represents the 45 seconds of perihelium and Mercury, sure. But, ladies and gentlemen, it is not unique, not even minimally unique. So therefore, I'm sorry, I cannot accept the existing claimed experimental verification as being so because of lack of uniqueness of the process in which the numbers are reached. Finally, the final blow of the experimental verification is due to the lack of invariance. The theory is covariant. So, at best, physicists in the field, orthodox physicists, should at least say, well, we froze, we have a Polaroid representation of the experimental behavior of the planets. But ladies and gentlemen, if you have a Polaroid representation, then don't even think of curvature, because it becomes laughable. And the moment you introduce the time evolution, first year graduate students can prove that due to covariance, lack of invariance, there is no possibility whatsoever of conserving over time the numerical prediction. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, all the claim by the orthodoxy in the field achieved with a river public money are intentional manipulation, not perpetrated in good faith, because the dissident papers have been systematically propagated. I remember Ilmas was, when I was in Cambridge, sending hundreds of papers around the world on the necessity of using a first order source stance on the right hand side. All those papers have been intentionally suppressed because of the collapse of ethics into the field that has to be addressed if we care about knowledge and the United States of America. What is the bottom line? The bottom line is that according to, and I have reviewed only part of the literature, that Einstein's conception of gravitation is fundamentally flawed. What is the origin of all those inconsistencies? The origin of all the inconsistencies is the curvature, because the curvature prohibits the construction of the identification of an invariant, of an invariance, of a symmetry. As we know now, even technically, we had to go to the Lie isotopic theory to have to broaden the Lie theory in order to achieve an invariance of all possible Riemannian line elements. But one of the conditions for that invariance today is known as Poincaré-Santilli isosymmetry. One of the conditions is to eliminate the curvature. The moment you put the curvature, then you go back to covariance. Once you lose the symmetry and you have covariance, there is no theory that can resist the test of time, and because of lack of prediction of numbers that are preserved in time. In any case, despite an additional use of large public funds and many, many experiments, gravitational waves have not been detected, and now it is almost, even by orthodox physicists in the field, they admit reluctantly that gravitational waves do not exist. But then, ladies and gentlemen, this is a direct experimental verification of lack of curvature, so which is the main point of this lecture. Let's now pass to the part 4 of this lecture, namely the totally unaddressed insufficiency of Einstein gravitation for the interior gravitational problem. This has been treated in many publications in referee journals. I only mention here hadronic mathematics, mechanics, and chemistry, because this series of books is dedicated to interior problem. So there you'll have a comprehensive presentation, but there is a bibliography, is 50-page long, if you are interested in the original papers. Okay, let's look first at Jupiter. So the very idea that Einstein gravitation is applicable for the interior of Jupiter, ladies and gentlemen, has no scientific foundation that I can consider as such. Countless reasons. Look at locally varying angular momentum, look at the existence of the entropy, thermodynamical laws, etc. It is very well known that Riemannian geometry is excessively simplistic for a representation of this complexity. It's just a GR, namely the metric is a function of the local coordinate period. But there is much more deeper reason for one of the reasons that is the politics on the so-called, quote, universal constancy of the speed of light, end of quote. That statement is political, ladies and gentlemen, and be aware of physicists when they present it as such. The correct statement is the statement formulated by Einstein, quote, universal constancy of the speed of light in vacuum. When you remove the word in vacuum, you enter into, you'll exit from science, enter into politics. Why they remove the word in vacuum? Because they want implicit, since they cannot say so, not to lose their face, then they want implicitly, automatically imply that the speed of light is universal everywhere, therefore also in the interior problem, which is of course not the case. I assume listening to this lecture have had an opportunity of listening to the lecture 1 of the litany of inconsistency of the reduction of all electromagnetic waves to photons. This is preposterous, ladies and gentlemen. Total abandonment of any light. There are certain frequency of light that indeed allow a photon, namely discrete absorption, that is beyond doubt. But the rest of the frequency we are referring to electromagnetic waves propagated by a medium. Even the photon himself is a wave packet. It's not a little ball. An enormous number of photons should traverse through an enormous number of nuclei on a straight line to represent physical evidence. We exit any boundary of plausibility. We enter into absolute absurdity and so on. But this implies that while in vacuum the light is propagates at the speed c inside Jupiter's atmosphere, there is a local variable, ladies and gentlemen, as proven beyond 80. And so you need a geometry capable of representing locally varying speed of light. You need a geometry that represents the inhomogeneity, because the density varies with the radius. A geometry that represents the anisotropy. Jupiter rotates. So those inhomogeneity and anisotropy are anathema for the Riemannian geometry, etc., etc., etc. All aspects ignored. Then when we go to the sun, now you see in all this glory the lack of a consistent quantum formulation of gravitation. I say the lack of an operator formulation of gravitation, because the idea that the quantum persists in the core of a star is highly debatable. Incidentally, the study of the interior gravitational problem at the operator level, let alone at the classical level, is the central objective of hadronic mechanics, which we study in detail in other lectures of this series. Let me address now, begin to approach very serious ethical issue in gravitation that have now passed all level of decency and acceptance. Now, which is all the so-called fanfare surrounding black holes. Let me state to begin with that of course Newtonian gravitation predicts that there exist masses that become so big and so dense that will not let light escape. The gravitational force becomes so strong that light cannot escape. This can be computed with Newton and even with Newtonian gravitation, formulated in terms of energy, not what mass. But what I am referring, so I'm not referring to I'm referring to the aspect of the so-called black hole theory that are totally ignored, intentionally ignored. What is the issue? Remember that the black holes originated from the Schwarzschild metric, in which you can see the horizon and all the gravitational collapse and all those features that flared up the imagination also of news media. But the Schwarzschild solution is a solution of what? It's a solution of Einstein field equation. What are Einstein field equations? Those are Einstein field equations in which on the right hand side there is 0, or there is an electromagnetic tensor that contributes 10 to the minus 40 to the gravitational field. So let's forget about 10 to the minus 40, and as Einstein did, let's put 0. But we have the paper on MIT Annals of Physics, as well as Ilma's work and many other works throughout the 20th century, have established that these equations are irreconcilably incompatible with quantum electrodynamics, incompatible with special relativity. The litany of inconsistency of those equations is endless. And those are equations that are assuming that the Riemannian geometry can correctly represent gravitation, which is a very, very doubtful. But let's assume that a Riemannian geometry can represent gravitation, then those will be the equation. But the point is that then the Schwarzschild solution is lost. The Schwarzschild solution is lost when one recognizes the evidence of the electromagnetic origin of the mass. What are the implications? The implications are beyond, I don't have to dwell in here, because basically this confirms what many people have stated without calculation. The black hole technically should be defined as a singularity, at least in my view. But singularity means the existence of infinity in the universe. Ladies and gentlemen, and I do not believe that there exist infinities. There can exist infinities in the universe. So, so the gravitational collapse into a point is beyond any rational or plausible or intuitional conception of nature. On technical ground, the equivocal aspect of all the studies on the black hole is due to the fact that they are all derived by exterior gravitation. So they study a problem that is fundamentally interior, due to be studied with interior gravitation. They study with the exterior gravitation, and they make claims of final achievement of physical truth. You see prizes and laudation around, mutual compliments in the news media, and all sorts of political fanfare and propaganda in the news media, because that's the only way they can achieve some recognition due to the lack of truly substantial structure. In conclusion, the problem of the gravitational collapse first of all, treated with Riemannian geometry has to be re-examined from its foundation. If you elect, we studied with different approach without curvature, but if you elect to study with curvature, you have to start with at least with equations that are compatible with quantum electrodynamics as a minimum. Then you have to find a solution that admits indeed a gravitational collapse, assuming that such a solution exists. The bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, is that Newtonian gravitation predicts a brown hole, not a black hole, namely a hole such as this one, which is finite, not the point, and that has a gravitation so strong that light cannot escape. The same conclusion is reached by hadronic mechanics. Let's review the origin of a real process of adulteration of science in respect to interior gravitational problem. Indeed, the very word interior gravitational problem does not exist in the best books and papers published throughout the 20th century. Now, let's remember that this distinction between interior and exterior problem was originally introduced by Lagrange, Hamilton, Jacobi, and other founders of dynamics. This distinction remained in full effect. Papers were written, studies were written with a title, specifying in the title, well, deal with exterior problem means point particle in vacuum, or interior problem, extended object in the interior of physical media. This remained up to the advent of Einstein general relativity. Even at that time, Schwarzschild wrote 2 papers, not one. The 2 papers, and if you look at the title, one is on the solutions of exterior gravitational problem, which is now historical. This is the Schwarzschild solution, and and the other is deals with the interior problem. The second was completely ignored throughout the 20th century because, of course, it's not compatible with Einstein gravitation, and so the paper does not exist. After that, the interior problem was eliminated by reducing the body to points moving in empty space. And but as we have seen since lecture 1, this is this type of extreme abstraction for political reason. Let's be very straight, honest, namely to adapt a theory under conditions that were way beyond those of the original conception. This extreme abstraction had been disproved by the so-called no-reduction theorem. So, so the conclusion is that a serious consideration of the gravitation requires first the study of the interior problem, because in the interior problem we see the origin of the gravitational field, and then in a way compatible with everything we know, the quantum electrodynamics and other Newtonian gravitation, special relativity, etc. And then after that we can pass to the exterior. But the gravitational problem of gravitational collapse must be studied within the context of the interior gravitational problem. As I indicated before, those are the main objectives of the hadronic mechanics. I can only flash it you very, very quickly. The theory that's been worked out has no curvature, and has an arbitrary functional dependence on the frequency of light, the speed, local speed, index of refraction, density, arbitrary unrestricted functional dependence. And of course it is based on universal invariance necessarily, and other conditions necessarily admits a consistent operator form using actually the same axiom of relativistic quantum mechanics. We embed the gravitation in the unit of relativistic quantum mechanics. So we use the axiom of relativistic quantum mechanics to formulate our operator form of gravity. This way we are sure to have a sound axiomatic foundation. And finally, there has to be a conjugation, anti-Hermitian, of course, to characterize the gravitation of antimatter, because until we do that, we risk to be hit by an antimatter asteroid without even being in a condition to describe or predict it, as indicated in the separate lectures on antimatter.